In the history of American crime, few names have inspired as much fascination as the Zodiac Killer. Not because he was the deadliest serial killer, not because he claimed the highest number of victims, but because, more than half a century later, nobody can say with certainty who he was. His murders terrified Northern California. His coded messages captivated the nation. And his taunting letters transformed an unknown killer into a cultural phenomenon. Yet, hidden within the mountain of correspondence attributed to Zodiac is a lesser-known mystery. Not the letters he sent, the letters he may have written, but never mailed. The drafts, the practice pages, the possible unsent communications that investigators believe could reveal more about the man behind the symbol than any cipher ever did. This is the story of the Zodiac Killer through the lens of the letters that almost nobody talks about. The letters that may have remained hidden for decades. And the clues they left behind. California. The late 1960s. The United States was in the middle of profound social change. The Vietnam War dominated headlines. Civil unrest simmered in major cities. Trust in institutions was beginning to erode. Against this backdrop, a series of seemingly random attacks began unfolding in Northern California. On the 20th of December 1968, two teenagers, David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, parked along a remote road near Vallejo. It was supposed to be an ordinary date. Instead, it became the beginning of one of the most notorious murder cases in American history. An unknown gunman approached their vehicle. Faraday was shot at close range. Jensen attempted to flee. She was shot multiple times and died nearby. Investigators had little to work with. The murders were disturbing, but at the time there was no reason to believe they were part of something larger. Then, on the 4th of July 1969, another young couple was attacked. Darlene Ferrin and Michael Majot sat in a parked car at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo. A vehicle pulled up beside them. The driver left briefly, then returned. Without warning, he opened fire. Ferrin was killed. Majot survived, despite severe injuries. Less than an hour later, a man called police and calmly reported the crime. He also claimed responsibility for the murders from the previous December. For investigators, a pattern was beginning to emerge. But they still had no idea that the killer was about to introduce himself to the world. On the 1st of August 1969, 3 newspapers received nearly identical letters. Each contained details that only the killer would have known. Each demanded publication. And each included one section of a cryptogram. The writer threatened further violence if his message was not printed. The newspapers complied. The author had achieved exactly what he wanted. Attention. A week later, a schoolteacher and his wife solved the cipher. The message was unsettling. The writer spoke about killing people because he believed they would become his servants in the afterlife. The letter was signed with a strange symbol, a circle crossed by vertical and horizontal lines. Soon afterward, another letter arrived. For the first time, the author gave himself a name, Zodiac. From that moment forward, the case changed forever. The murders were no longer simply homicide investigations. They became a public spectacle. The Zodiac understood something many criminals never grasped. Fear spreads faster than violence, and words can travel farther than bullets. Over the following months, more attacks occurred. In September 1969, college students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were relaxing near Lake Berryessa. A hooded figure approached. Unlike previous attacks, this man spoke calmly. He claimed to be an escaped convict. Then he bound the victims before stabbing them repeatedly. Before leaving, the attacker wrote a message on Hartnell's car door. The writing included dates connected to previous Zodiac crimes. The signature was unmistakable. The symbol was there once again. Shepard later died from her injuries. Hartnell survived. For investigators, this attack confirmed that Zodiac was willing to alter his methods while maintaining his obsession with recognition. The next major attack came just weeks later. In October 1969, taxi driver Paul Stein picked up a passenger in San Francisco. The passenger shot him inside the cab and removed part of his shirt. Witnesses observed the suspect leaving the scene. Police officers briefly encountered a man matching the description but failed to stop him due to a communication error. It would become one of the most frustrating moments in the entire investigation. Soon after, newspapers received another Zodiac letter. Inside was a piece of Paul Stein's bloody shirt, proof that the writer was indeed the killer. Again and again, Zodiac demonstrated the same pattern. He wanted control Control over the investigation. Control over public fear. Control over his own mythology. And he exercised that control through letters. By 1970, the correspondence had become nearly as significant as the murders themselves. Zodiac sent cryptograms, threats, maps, and bizarre statements. Some communications appeared designed to confuse investigators. Others seemed intended purely for attention. The public followed every development. Reporters analyzed every phrase. Cryptographers examined every symbol. Detectives chased countless leads. Meanwhile, Zodiac remained unidentified. Yet, amid the chaos of the official letters, investigators began encountering something unusual. Documents that looked like Zodiac communications, but had never entered the public spotlight. Possible drafts, practice writings, materials that suggested the killer may have spent considerable time preparing his messages before sending them. One of the most intriguing discoveries emerged years later. Investigators examining evidence connected to Zodiac communications found indications that some writings may have been rehearsed. Certain phrases appeared repeatedly. Letter formation showed similarities across multiple documents. There were signs of deliberate construction rather than spontaneous writing. This raised an important question. If Zodiac carefully crafted the letters he mailed, how many versions existed before the final copies? The letters received by newspapers may have represented only the finished product, like a screenplay revised multiple times before publication. If draft versions existed, they could reveal mistakes, changes in wording, different spellings, moments where the killer's natural writing style slipped through. Forensic document examiners have long understood the value of drafts. People can disguise handwriting. They can alter language. They can create false personas. But maintaining that disguise consistently across every version of a document is much harder. The possibility of unsent Zodiac writings became particularly significant because investigators possessed so little physical evidence pointing to a suspect. The letters were among the few direct connections to the killer. Every pen stroke mattered. Every spelling choice mattered. Every crossed-out word mattered. Over the decades, various researchers have argued that hidden clues may exist within these lesser-known materials. Some believe draft documents suggest Zodiac was more educated than he wanted people to think. Others believe the writings indicate deliberate attempts to appear unstable while actually being highly organized. What becomes clear is that the public image of Zodiac may have been carefully manufactured. The misspellings, the strange phrasing, the theatrical threats. All of it may have been part of a performance, a character created by the killer. And if that character was constructed, then draft writings become incredibly valuable. They may show the man before the mask. As years passed, countless suspects emerged. Some investigators favored one individual. Others favored another. Books were written. Documentaries were produced. Amateur researchers devoted decades to the mystery, yet no suspect was ever conclusively identified. Advances in forensic science renewed hope. DNA testing was conducted on some Zodiac materials. Handwriting analyses were revisited. Digital tools allowed cryptographers to tackle ciphers that had remained unsolved for decades. In 2020, a team of private codebreakers successfully decoded the infamous 340 character cipher. Many hoped it would reveal Zodiac's identity. Instead, the message offered little more than additional insight into his mindset. It reinforced something investigators had long suspected. The Zodiac enjoyed manipulating his audience. He enjoyed being watched. And he enjoyed controlling the narrative. Even now, the case remains officially unsolved. No court has ever convicted the Zodiac Killer. No definitive identification has been accepted by law enforcement. The murders remain among America's most enduring criminal mysteries. And the letters remain at the center of that mystery. Not just the famous communications published on front pages, but the possibility that somewhere, hidden among evidence files, private collections, forgotten boxes, or undiscovered archives, there may be writings that never reach their intended audience. Unsent drafts. Practice pages. Abandoned versions. Fragments of a voice that spent years trying to control how it was heard. Perhaps the greatest irony of the Zodiac case is that the killer desperately wanted attention. He wrote letters to ensure he would never be forgotten. And in that goal, he succeeded. But despite all his words, all his threats, all his ciphers and symbols, The one thing he wanted most remains beyond reach. Recognition. The world remembers the name Zodiac. Yet the man behind that name remains unknown. A ghost hidden behind ink and paper. A killer who spoke constantly. And somehow never revealed who he truly was. More than 50 years later, investigators are still listening, searching not only for what Zodiac said, but for what he chose not to send, because somewhere in those missing words may lie the answer that has escaped generations of detectives. The identity of the Zodiac Killer.
If this story stayed with you, it should. Cases like this one exist because someone, somewhere, knows something. If you want to see more real, carefully researched true crime stories like this one, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Every case we cover is real, every detail verified. Like this video if it moved you. Share it, because sometimes the right person seeing the right story changes everything. We'll see you in the next one.